Short, powerful phrases to maintain rhythm and impact. Most people grow up believing history is shaped by a small group of powerful names: kings, generals, presidents, revolutionaries whose faces end up in textbooks. We're taught that change only happens when someone famous decides to act. But what if that's only half the story? What if some of the most important turns in history were caused by people who never wanted attention, never expected recognition, and never imagined they were doing anything extraordinary?
Short, powerful phrases to maintain rhythm and impact. Think about how many decisions you've made that felt small at the time. Things you did out of necessity, fear, instinct, or responsibility, not because you wanted to be remembered. History is full of people just like that. People who didn't set out to become heroes, who didn't see themselves as special, and who often disappeared from the story entirely. Today, we're talking about those people. The anonymous anti-heroes who changed the course of history without ever trying to.
Short, powerful phrases to maintain rhythm and impact. When we learn history, it's usually framed as a sequence of great leaders making bold moves. One person gives an order, another signs a document, a general wins a battle, and suddenly the world changes. That version of history is clean, simple, and easy to teach. But it also creates a dangerous illusion that if you don't have power, status, or a platform, your actions don't really matter. In reality, history is messy. It's built on countless small decisions made by ordinary people under pressure. Messengers who chose to delay a letter. Workers who decided to speak up or stay silent. Civilians who helped, hid, warned, or refused. Most of them never appear in official records, not because their actions were insignificant, but because history tends to remember outcomes, not individuals without titles.
Short, powerful phrases to maintain rhythm and impact. These people don't fit the traditional hero narrative. They weren't flawless. They were scared, conflicted, sometimes selfish, sometimes unsure. That's why they're better described as anti-heroes, not villains, not saints, just human beings who acted in moments when their choices mattered more than they realized. So who are these anonymous anti-heroes? They're the people who didn't chase glory. They didn't give speeches or lead armies. Often, they didn't even know the full picture of what was happening. They only knew what was in front of them: a decision, a risk, a consequence. And instead of doing nothing, they acted. Or sometimes, they chose not to act. And that made all the difference.
The reason we rarely hear about them isn't accidental. History is usually written by those in power, by institutions, by the winners of conflicts. Anonymous individuals don't fit neatly into national myths or political narratives. Their stories are harder to tell, harder to verify, and harder to use as symbols, so they're quietly left out. But if you look closely, you start to see them everywhere. Imagine an ordinary person living under an oppressive system. No influence, no protection, no guarantee of safety. One day, they're faced with a choice: follow the rules and stay safe, or break them and risk everything. They don't think of themselves as brave. They think of themselves as scared, but doing what feels necessary.
In one historical case, a low-level worker noticed something that didn't feel right. It wasn't their job to question it. In fact, questioning it could cost them everything. But ignoring it meant becoming complicit. So they made a quiet decision, not a dramatic one, just a human one. They passed along information they weren't supposed to. That single act helped expose a chain of events that would later save thousands of lives. Their name never became famous, but the impact of that choice rippled far beyond them.
Short, powerful phrases to maintain rhythm and impact. In another case, someone performed what seemed like a minor action. They delayed a process, just hours, maybe even minutes. At the time, it looked insignificant, a technicality, a small disruption in routine. But that delay changed the timing of an event, which changed who was present, which changed what happened next. Historians later traced a major outcome back to that moment. The person who caused it never knew. They went home thinking it was just another day.
What connects these stories isn't heroism in the cinematic sense. It's uncertainty. None of these people knew the outcome. None of them acted with the confidence that history would justify them. They acted with incomplete information, under pressure, often afraid they were making the wrong choice.
That's something we rarely talk about when we talk about heroes. We like the idea of certainty, the idea that heroes know they're doing the right thing. But most real-world change happens without that clarity. It happens when people act anyway. If you line these stories up, a pattern starts to emerge. These anonymous anti-heroes weren't powerful. They didn't have authority. They didn't have backup plans. What they had was proximity to a moment where a small decision mattered. And when that moment came, they didn't step away. They also shared something else. They were easy to overlook. No statues were built for them. No holidays were named after them. In some cases, their actions were only discovered decades later. In others, they're still unknown. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If history is full of people like this, how many stories have we lost entirely? How many outcomes we credit to famous names were actually shaped by someone whose name we'll never know? This isn't just about the past, it's about how we see ourselves now. A lot of people today feel insignificant, like unless they're visible, influential, or exceptional, they don't really matter. Social media reinforces that idea. Attention equals value. But history tells a very different story. It tells us that impact doesn't require an audience. It requires a moment and a choice.
Right now, there are people making decisions they think are small. Speaking up at work, helping someone quietly, refusing to participate in something that feels wrong, sharing information, protecting someone else at personal cost. Most of these actions will never be recognized, but that doesn't mean they're irrelevant. The people we talked about didn't wake up thinking they were going to change history. They woke up thinking about getting through the day, and yet their actions shape outcomes far beyond their own lives. That's the transformation this perspective offers. Once you stop seeing history as something made only by famous figures, you start to see it as something constantly being built by ordinary people, one decision at a time. You realize that relevance isn't about recognition, it's about consequence.
And maybe the most unsettling part is this. Many of these anti-heroes never knew what they'd done. They lived and died without realizing the weight of their actions. History moved on without saying thank you. So the question isn't whether people like this exist today. They do. The question is whether when a moment comes that puts you in the middle of something larger than yourself, you'll recognize it as just another ordinary choice, or as a chance to matter, even if no one ever knows your name. Because history isn't only written by heroes. Sometimes it's shaped by someone who never realized they were part of it.